Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Sacramento Zoo live segment. My name's Bailey.
My name is Mike.
And today we're going to be talking to you a little bit about these two very different green parrots. We have Julia here, who is a thick-billed parrot.
And Robbie, who's an Eclectus parrot. And we'd also like to thank Jiffy Lube of Greater Sacramento for their support. And thank you for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As this live segment is going, please feel free to ask us any questions about these parrots. We'd love to answer them as we go on. Additionally, you can put in your guesses for how old you think Julia and Robbie are. It's one of the top questions we get, so keep putting in your guesses for those, and we will get to that in just a little bit. But first off, Julia here, the thick-billed parrot. She was actually born here at the Sacramento Zoo. She's eyeing some of the enrichment we'll be interacting with in just a little bit. Like I said, she was born here at the Sacramento Zoo, and she was on exhibit originally, but she actually came to be an animal ambassador because she was born with a couple disabilities that made it more difficult for her to live with the rest of the flock on display. Now she is actually eyeing one of her favorite treats, so I'm just gonna go ahead and let her have it, but ask her, will you say hi to them? Say hi. Julia, say hi. We'll see if she maybe wants to do that sitting here. Julia, say hi. Say hi. Say hi. Oh, there we go. So she's gonna eat one of her favorite treats. I'll let you guys watch and I'll just talk here in the back. That is a king mealworm. And so essentially she is just finding a good spot on that perch to eat and destroy that mealworm. You can see she's gonna use some of her adaptations. She will likely use her feet to hold that in place right on cue there. And she'll use her big bill or her beak to rip it apart and kind of shred it a little bit. Now these birds were originally found in the United States, one of two native species of parrot to the United States. But unfortunately, one of those two species, the Carolina parakeet, went extinct. So the thick-billed parrot is the only current or extant species that is still living today. However, they were kind of pushed out of their range of New Mexico and Arizona. Now they're found in northern Mexico only. They are extinct in the United States, but there are still a few in the wild, but it does make them endangered. So a lot of what we do with Julia's messaging with their parrots that are out in their habitat in the zoo is a lot of conservation. So we do breed these parrots in human care here at the Sacramento Zoo, and that's why Julia was born here. If you're ever back in the zoo and you do happen upon the habitat of thick-billed parrots, you'll notice there are a lot of them in a big group, which is called a flock. They're flying around, they're squawking, making lots of noises. In fact, a lot of the noises that they make can be heard for up for a mile away, which is pretty loud for them. And you'll also see younger parrots in there with their parents, with their family groups, and they have lighter beaks, which are generally a white or gray color. But Julia here, that was a little hint for you guys putting in your guesses for the ages. Hers is not white or gray like that, so that does signify she's not a younger parrot. Now she's finally found a comfortable spot here on my hand to eat that mealworm, but I'll let Mike tell you a little bit about Robbie the Eclectus parrot while she finishes that.
Thank you, Bailey. So as Bailey mentioned, this is Robbie. Now Robbie's an Eclectus parrot. Eclectus parrots are actually native to the South Pacific, so areas of Australia, the Solomon Islands, that general region. Eclectus parrots are very unique in the parrot family as parrots go because they exhibit a high degree of sexual dimorphism. It's a fancy meaning for the fact that males and females look very different. Now look at Robbie here. He's got that candy corn beak, lovely green feathers covering his body, under his wings blue and red, which is typical for a male Eclectus. Now if you happen to ever spot a female Eclectus out in the wild or in a human care, you'll notice they look very, very different. Black beak, crimson red head, kind of a purplish blue body, so they are just incredibly different. In fact, many years ago when the ornithologists first discovered these parrots in the South Pacific, they thought there were two separate species. And ornithologists, people who study birds, being ornithologists, they thought, let's breed these birds in human care. What they did was they collected a lot of green parrots with candy corn beaks. They collected a lot of red, crimson head, purple parrots. They put them in separate cages, and guess what happened? Nothing, because they had the females here, males there, no babies. Until they figured out with more observation, they're actually the same species, just very different in color. And again, that's very, very unusual in the world of parrots. Once they figure that out, well, lots of baby parrots since then. Now Robbie is 20, oh, well, where did I just, oh, we're gonna.
That's a hint.
That's a hint. Okay, I'm gonna step right there. I almost blew that. Okay, so he is a mature parrot. Now parrots do live a long, long time. In fact, some parrots might live 60, 70, 80 years. These guys, well, you're gonna find out how long they live in a couple of minutes. But as far as talking goes, now of course you heard Julia with her perfect little hi. Robbie really has a pretty amazing vocabulary in his own right. Big differences though, he doesn't always like to do it when we ask him. In fact, he's probably one of our most talkative birds, and when he's feeling like it, he'll just chat up a storm. He makes little robot noises, very cool things. It's really an adaptation to help them survive in the wild, but mimicry is very much an important part of parrot survival.
Pretty neat. Now you'll notice as you see these two parrots next to each other, they do look pretty different. So we'll kind of touch on some of those differences between Robbie and Julia. First off being where they live. You heard Mike mention this kind of parrot, the Eclectus parrot, would be found more in the Solomon Islands near Australia area. And Julia, like I mentioned, their kind of native range, the thick-billed parrot, is going to be northern Mexico. But what's pretty unique about the thick-billed parrot is that they can survive in different climates than most parrots. They can live up higher in kind of alpine forests, eating lots of different pine nuts, and being able to survive much colder temperatures. If you guys listen closely, you might be able to hear Robbie. He's starting to chat up a storm over there.
A storm there, yeah.
But they can be found in elevations, even a couple thousand feet up, and so they have a much higher tolerance for different kind of climates than, say, the Eclectus parrot. Robbie, were you going to say something?
Apparently not.
Pretty neat. So do we have any guesses yet for those ages? No guesses yet. We'll keep putting your guesses in. We do have a myriad of enrichments set up here for these parrots, so we'll kind of maybe let them explore some of those things. But Mike, do you want to tell everyone about this conservation nest box here?
Sure
and I'll
thing.
have Julia exhibit that?
Right, now as Bailey mentioned, the thick-billed parrot is an endangered species. Now, here at the Sacramento Zoo, we very much like to support conservation efforts around the world and for different species. That includes thick-billed parrot. Now, Julia actually has a particularly kind of specialized little talent. She likes to drop things in boxes. So we discovered this years ago. She likes to take dollar bills when we are in our full operation. She'll take them from guests, drop them in a box, just like that.
Amazing.
Pretty amazing. We call that a dollar bill trick. The simplest dollar bill trick you can imagine, but in over 20 some odd years, Julia has raised thousands of dollars, which has gone towards thick-billed parrot conservation. I know that, sorry about that, Julia, I distracted you. Lots of other conservation projects around the world. So again, she's done an amazing job supporting her own species and other species out in the wild.
And if you guys have visited us here at the Sacramento Zoo, you might recognize both of these parrots from our wildlife stage shows. Generally, Julia would be out after the show collecting 1, 5, 10, 20, maybe even $100 bill.
It's happened.
Occasional. And she might be collecting those for visitors, which we can donate to conservation. So these two helping us in those stage shows, going out to schools on our Zoomobile programs, participating in overnight situations here at the zoo with Girl Scout troops or bigger groups, all of that makes them an animal ambassador for their species. So Mike and I can, interpret and talk about them, helping spread awareness for their habitats and for their species as well. Now, Julia here oftentimes will like to take a bath, so we might offer that to her. We also brought out a diet that we'll show you guys in just a minute. So we'll kind of see if she wants to cool off. It looks like it's a hard no for the water. We don't want to be in the water. But generally, she will take baths in the morning. That's one of her favorite kind of activities, as well as just shredding, throwing things like you heard Mike mention. So maybe we'll let you guys take a look at what's inside of her diet over here. Do we have any guesses or questions
We
yet,
do
Kate?
have some guesses on the ages. One of the guesses is Robbie 20 and Julia 10. And then another guess, Julia 22, Robbie 25.
That's
pretty
pretty
close there.
close.
We are getting
Yeah.
close.
Julia has decided to
I'm
go to
going to go ahead and reiterate what species they are just because of the mass. I know it's kind of hard, but Julia right here is actually a thick-billed parrot who's going in the box. So that is a thick-billed parrot. And then Robbie is an Eclectus parrot, as he keeps an eye on what Julia might be doing in that box. Another guesses for those ages are Robbie 26, Julia 24. So we're getting
really
close.
Really close there. Now we should mention too now, these two actually have sort of a complex relationship, you might say. As you might notice, Robbie is being very, very attentive what Julia happens to be doing at the moment. And you can see Julia is looking back at you saying, being very coy. Like, hi, I'm in my little house here. And Robbie's saying, because Robbie happens to be in love with Julia. They're different species, but Julia simply adores, or Robbie simply adores Julia. Unfortunately for Robbie, that affection is not necessarily returned.
It's true.
It's true. It's a complex, or little
One-sided love affair.
yeah, little soap opera right here at the Sacramento Zoo. But they still get along together. If one goes off to do an animal encounter or something, the other's like, where'd they go? So they definitely do have a really good relationship with one another. It's just not always reciprocated.
Yep. And I have one of Julia's diets here, so being, you know, in love, maybe one-sided there. They do sometimes share food. Luckily, their diets are pretty similar. So if you guys can see, we will give a lot of our parrots this Parrot Zupreme, which is essentially a biscuit that has a lot of the same nutrients that they would need. With Julia's biscuits, we actually soak them because she has a little bit of trouble chewing. She has a little bit of a disability with her tongue. That's why she can't be on exhibit with the other birds. One of her wings also doesn't fully extend, so that's why she came here with us to be an animal ambassador, although she was born here at the Sacramento Zoo. So Robbie does enjoy the soaked biscuits also. Maybe not right now, but he enjoys those too, so sometimes they'll share that. And then there's just a different variety here of produce, both fruits and vegetables. Generally, grapes are a favorite of both of these parrots too. They enjoy corn because it's a little bit sweeter, and then they'll get walnuts, almonds, pine nuts, cashews, sunflower seeds, you name it. They like all of those different things. Now, like you saw earlier, Julia will also eat insects, and sometimes eclectuses in the wild will have a little bit of protein in their diet as well.
Let's see if Julia is feeling like taking that.
She's engaging. You can actually sort of hear her ripping into that cardboard box.
These birds are both actually species of cavity nesters, so they do tend to hollow out tree trunks. That's actually where the thick-billed parrot got their name. Was in fact that big beak was great for hollowing out tree trunks. And Eclectus parrots are also the same. So the females will hollow out a nice nest along with the male, and the female lays her eggs in that nest and incubates them. And one thing about Eclectus parrots, they tend to be a little promiscuous in their lifestyle. Now, a female Eclectus might have 4 to 6 males kind of attending to her, taking care of things like taking care of the nest, bringing food. And it's also one of the reasons why they suspect, or one of the theories is, the female has such different colors, is that they can tell one another. So if a male pops up in the nest with a bright red head, the males know, oh, there's a female in here, probably with a family, so we're going to take care of her.
Now you guys will notice Robbie there is just sitting pretty calmly with Mike. Being, you know, with animal ambassadors here, we're pretty hands-on with these parrots, making sure that they feel safe and comfortable. And we do a style of training called operant conditioning, mainly with positive reinforcement, so that Robbie feels, you know, that he can step up safely. He'll get a seed or a nut as a reward. And we actually train these birds to help with their own husbandry or their own health care as well. So with Robbie here, we can actually ask him to sit on a perch, and we will sometimes file or trim his nails. So he is actively participating in his own healthcare. You know, we have an incredible vet staff team here from UC Davis, which will help us with annual exams, anytime something goes wrong with an animal, maybe pain management for some of those more geriatric individuals. But for some of those basic procedures like nail trimmings or filings, we can use our training here with both Robbie and Julia for them to participate in their own healthcare, be able to get rewarded as well. We'll also trim their wings so that they can't fly off and away, but could glide down if needed. And generally they will share a lot of the same space throughout the day. They're out on top of their houses, can walk around, climb different perches, destroy and chew things, and then they are just separated at night to sleep in their individual houses there.
Now, Bailey did mention wing trimming. Now, actually, Robbie is a fully flighted parrot. And many years ago, in our wildlife presentations here in our zoo amphitheater, he did a flight demonstration. And whenever you free-fly a bird, at some point or another, you are going to encounter what's called a fly-off. Something startles a bird, something in the bird says, I want to go explore. Well, Robbie did that. Unfortunately, that meant Robbie went for a flight out into Land Park. As you know, we have lots of trees out in Land Park. And Robbie basically mocked the trainers. This is like years and years and years ago. They went to try to get Robbie back down. He just kind of sat up on the tree and said, hi, which is how he says hi. Hi. Not wanting to come back to the yeah, okay. Well, sorry, Robbie, I know you can do better than that. My specialty for these has been bird impressions, I guess you may have noticed. Anyway, Robbie decided, well, I'm just going to keep playing my little games, flying from tree to tree. Well, unfortunately, being a small parrot, he was kind of a prey item, potential prey item for some of our birds of prey, raptors that live in our park. And at one point, Robbie was making a flight from tree to tree, and a hawk thought, well, there's my next meal. Came, almost got Robbie. Fortunately, Robbie, being a very aerobatic bird, made a quick flip in the sky, landed. Robbie decided, well, I'm done with this. Came back to his trainers, and now we do trim. We just trim one wing. You know, it doesn't hurt, just like in your haircut. And that way we know he's not going to be making his way out into the trees here at the zoo.
All right, so we have a couple of questions now. We also have some age guesses too, but I'm going to go with the questions real fast and then we can do ages. So Brooklyn, age 5, would like to know what their absolute favorite foods are.
Absolute favorite.
Absolute
That is a
favorite.
tough one. I would
changes
say,
day by day
Yeah, I was
sometimes.
gonna say it really does change. As of recent, the mealworms seem to be a favorite of Julia's. About Robbie.
And Robbie, you know, generally seeds and nuts. He loves normally he loves cashews. He loves pistachios, lots of different things. You know, so lots of seeds and nuts. In the wild, these birds eat a lot of fruit, but it can change by the minute sometimes. Like one time they go, oh, I've got the perfect treat for them. Next time it's like, yeah, right, whatever. So it's something you always adapt. You're always changing your training style, and reinforcers, things like that, things that your animals love.
Now, someone asked too, how does the shape of their beak influence what they can eat?
That's actually a good question, because you can tell a lot about a bird by their beak and their feet. Now, for example, you've probably seen some of our raptors here on our Facebook Lives. You know, birds of prey, raptors, owls use their feet to catch their prey. Well, a bird like this is going to use his beak like a tool, basically to scoop out big chunks of fruit, crack seeds and nuts. And even though it kind of looks very similar to a hawk or an eagle's beak, it's actually used very differently. And there's all the power in a parrot's beak would be in the beak, whereas a raptor, bird of prey, most of their power is in their feet. So again, birds like kookaburras and kingfishers have a long pointed beak for catching their prey on the ground or in the water. These guys aren't chasing their prey, they're actually flying to the prey, or not prey, their food, their diet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And although Julia is called a thick-billed parrot, her bill or her beak is just about as thick as other parrots. It is very powerful. She's like, Robbie, that's too close.
That's a
not
big parrot.
6 feet.
Yeah.
Not social distancing for parrots.
And that power in that beak is something all parrot owners learn very, very quickly, how hard they can
It's true.
bite down with that beak.
Very true.
That's right. When that answers that question too, can they bite? Indeed they can.
Yeah,
and
they
you can
certainly
see
can.
Robbie's trying to bite Mike's shirt there.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'll get into mischief, or Julia might bite. You know, if you think about it, that's kind of their way of communicating. Maybe I don't want to do this right now, or maybe I think this is a game. So we generally will take that and, you know, put that into our training and kind of read their behavior if they are in a bad mood or lunging or biting.
Especially because they're social animals, and that can be a way that they
Absolutely.
kind of communicate with their neighbors.
Yeah,
and
biting
so-
off buttons is one of Robbie's specialties too,
Oh, yes.
off our polo shirts.
Hi.
All right.
As a
So
matter of fact, Kate, I believe,
I
she
am
right there,
missing a
Robbie's
button
moved.
from Robbie. It is true.
Julia, that's
It is a perfect Robbie shirt.
Yes.
All right. So a couple other guesses. Robbie 28, Julia 25. Yep. So Robbie is in fact 28 years old. He was hatched in April of 1992. And then Bailey, how old is Julia?
Julia is 21 years old. So whoever guessed, I think someone guessed 22 earlier. That was pretty spot on. She was hatched out in 1999.
That's right. Okay, we don't have any more current questions, so if you guys would like to keep telling us, or if they need to engage in any enrichment too.
Yeah, you
that
know,
is
Julia
perfectly
is
fine.
mostly done with that box, but I might let her climb and you guys can exhibit some of this bark. Now, out in their natural habitat in those kind of alpine forests in northern Mexico, up into those higher altitudes, oftentimes they will try to camouflage as best as they can with some of the bark or the wood. Now, they do have a lot of predators out in the wild, which is what makes them such a difficult species to bring back from the brink of extinction. Being endangered, people have tried to, you know, put this parrot back out in the wild, maybe get some of their numbers up, but you know, a lot of times different things like hawks or even nighttime predators that are carnivorous can come and try to get these birds. They are pretty agile. They can do different twists and turns to avoid those predators. But being a smaller bird, as you can imagine, it is a little bit difficult when there are so many predators out there. That's kind of what happens with the food chain when some ecosystems are disturbed. So besides predation, other things that kind of led to the thick-billed parrot being endangered were loss of habitat, even illegal hunting or illegal pet trade, and ultimately deforestation. So the thick-billed parrot is not very common in the pet trade anymore, being endangered, but the eclectus is actually legal to have as a pet. Not the thick-billed parrot, but the eclectus is. So you can see she's demonstrating all of the ripping of this bark. This is pretty much what she does, some of her favorite things to do. And Robbie's just in awe watching her sitting back.
Just admiring from afar.
Pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Now, as Bailey mentioned, these are endangered birds. And, you know, she was hatched right here at the zoo. She is part of a breeding program called the Species Survival Plan Breeding Program. At one point back in the the mid 1980s, there was an attempt to release thick-billed parrots back into their original range in Arizona and New Mexico. What they found out is that those birds didn't really know how to forage for food. Now, one thing, a favorite food of the thick-billed parrot happens to be pine nuts, which come from pine cones. As you know, pine cones are very tough to get the seeds or nuts out of. Thick-billed parrots have a very specialized technique. They basically start at the bottom, work a little spiral, working their way up into the pine cone, getting the seeds out. Well, that is a skill that's best taught to the youngsters by a mother who's raised in the wild. They figured out, well, this isn't working. Also, a big problem was predation. Now, their former range, like in the mountains of Arizona, in the forested areas, it's great, but also, the human population has increased dramatically in Arizona. Well, people produce a lot of trash. That trash goes into landfills. Landfills attract rats. Well, those rats also attract things like hawks and other birds of prey. They found out many of those birds were being preying on thick-billed parrots. So several years after they figured out that wasn't working, well, they just discontinued that program. So now we're raising these and nurturing these birds and kept in human care. That way we'll have a good genetically diverse population of thick-billed parrots in zoos across the country.
All right. Now, someone asked a question too. What do they use that mimicry, that kind of sound mimicry for in the wild? How does that help them in the wild?
It can be used in many different ways. One is to mimic other members of your flock. Could be to mimic sounds of other animals, other species, maybe trying to use sound to act as a form of camouflage. So again, and also, it's something that, as far as people go, they can, mimic the sound, our sounds, our speech, and things like that. Not necessarily part of their survival in the wild, but it's also one of the reasons why parrots are such a popular pet. Now, we always like to talk about parrots as pets. Now, we mentioned how old these birds are. They can easily live into their 40s. Some larger parrots might live 60, 70, 80 years. So it really is something to consider if you get a bird like this as a pet. The fact they can, they can live a long, long time. They can be very destructive with their beak. They bite. They can be very loud. That's something we always want to make sure people are aware of, is that parrots do have a lot of very special needs. I mean, they really are an exotic animal, not to be taken lightly if you're trying to care for one, for an animal that might even outlive you, potentially.
Yeah, and if you think about how destructive Julia's being here, oftentimes if they don't have enough stimulation, and that goes for sensory items, sometimes they need to, hear music or hear you, they need to interact with different food, have things to shred, purchase to climb. If they don't have that, they can be destructive. And this could be your couch or something in your home, maybe even your hand, that she is just ripping apart there, just because she does need something to do, bark to sharpen her beak and different things like that.
All right, we have a question from Thomas, age 5. Which of these two parrots is larger?
That's a great question,
Yeah.
Thomas. It's going to be Robbie, actually, the Eclectus parrot. He does weigh probably about 100 to 150 more grams than Julia does. But, generally, Eclectus parrots are going to be a little bit larger than thick-billed parrots.
And also, too, now, as Bailey was mentioning, as far as socialization now, again, these birds are very, very social. And in their care, they need a lot of interaction with other members of their flock, or in a case of one being in human care as a pet, they need constant mental stimulation. A lot of times they don't get that. So not only might they be destructive to your furniture, sometimes they'll actually pluck their own feathers. You'll often, unfortunately, see parrots that'll come out of maybe not ideal situations that are basically featherless from the neck down because they've plucked out their feathers. So again, something to really, really take into account if you ever want a larger parrot as a pet.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know we talked about this earlier, but some people are joining in.
Great.
They are asking, do these two parrots get along? So I thought you guys could kind of reiterate their kind of bond in their story.
Yeah, so I guess the short answer is they get along well enough. However, Mike mentioned earlier, Robbie is just in love with Julia. He thinks that she's the greatest thing ever. She is his companion. And she thinks neutral about Robbie. She is not as in love with him. And oftentimes she will definitely let him know. Just earlier, she tried to lunge at him when he got a little bit too close. So oftentimes this is Robbie's favorite thing, just watching Julia interact with whatever she is. But they don't necessarily, it's not a mutual love, I will say.
Yeah, sometimes like our birds love to be preened. Basically, as their new feathers come in, they get what are called pin feathers. We like to help preen them every now and then. And if you start preening Julia, Robbie comes over and sort of lives vicariously through the trainer who's doing the preening.
It's true.
It is true. Now, Annabelle, age 7, asked how many birds, I'm assuming we can answer that fairly roughly, do we have at the zoo?
How many different kinds of birds?
Sure. We just have how many birds? Let's do different kinds-ish.
Let's see. Well,
Probably about 10.
at least. Yeah.
At least
Okay.
10.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
10 different
We have
kinds.
quite a few different kinds from all over the world,
Yeah, I
really,
mean-
so there's so many different habitats and regions
Exactly.
that we
Yeah.
managed
Probably,
to cover.
yeah, 10 to 15 birds I think total. Oh well, actually, take it back. Well, as far as actual count, we have like over 14 thick-billed parrots living in their aviary.
That's true. Yep. Over 35 flamingos out on the lake there. We've got, hornbills. We have birds of prey. There's a couple owls. And then in the interpretive center here, we have 3 different kinds of parrots, multiple owls and hawks, even an eagle. And ducks as well. So lots of different kinds of birds.
Okay. Going back to a little bit of their kind of social behaviors, we have a couple of questions as well. How long have these guys kind of been together, been kind of that bonded?
Pretty much their entire lives. I think,
Yeah.
Robbie was here in our interpretive center, early on. Julia joined in later on,
Yeah.
probably another 6 or 7 years
That's what I was
after.
saying. 2001 is when
Yes,
she came up to the
2001.
interpretive center. So about 19 years then.
And what kind of behaviors do we look for that shows us that Robbie is kind of attached to Julia?
Just following her around, always watching her, basically kind of just making a sound. Good job, Robbie.
It's a loving sound.
It's a very loving sound. So just, the way he wants to really attend to her and kind of take care of her, but she doesn't really want anything to do with him. So unfortunate, but yeah, that's just very
In that
different.
aspect, he kind of is trying to be that good provider,
Exactly,
right? Like
yeah.
showing
Yeah,
that he
which
could
is-
be a good mate.
Yeah, that's what male birds tend to do. They want to be the provider. Julie just doesn't really care to accept it.
All right, Charlotte, age 6. Why are they both those colors?
That is a good question, Charlotte. So they aren't from the same area of the world. They are from pretty different habitats as well as locations around the world here. But they kind of are both green, mostly for camouflage. So Mike mentioned earlier in the eclectus world, which is what Robbie is, an eclectus parrot, the males and females are very different colors. But generally the males are going to be that green so that they can blend in with the trees and find the females who are born to stand out quite literally in the forest there or in the jungle. Whereas Julia here, kind of those red and green colors, that's to help her blend in with pine forests and a lot of those different trees and try to remain as hidden as she can during the day when some of those daytime predators are out.
All right, guys, we're kind of wrapping up on time. So would you guys like to give any closing remarks?
Well, again, we'd like to thank everyone for all of their support here, for the Sacramento Zoo. If you have any other questions, post, I'll try to answer later. Also, supporting the zoo, if you'd like to offer any support to the zoo, go to our saczoo.org. You'll see a link to, for donations. Also, of course, want to once again thank Jiffy Lube of Greater Sacramento for all of their assistance in bringing these presentations to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning into our Facebook Lives twice a week, and thank you for supporting us during this really difficult time. We appreciate it, the animals do too, and we're happy to be able to bring the zoo to you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.